So yeah, today's presentation is about sprinkler heads. Yeah, there's lots to say about sprinkler heads actually. So I've put this as part one. There'll definitely be a part two. There may even be a part three as well. So yeah, what I'd like to do is to give you some more kind of live demonstrations. Project Fire, we don't have one of these kind of rigs where we could actually, set something on fire and see the sprinkler heads operating and putting fire out. Some companies do have these kind of trailers at which they can sort of drive around the country and demonstrate sprinklers, but I'm sure we can rig something up so we can see at least something of an activation live. And also we have a video which we did in conjunction with the Fire and Rescue Service on the island of Jersey, which we did a few years ago. And again, that's on our YouTube presence as well. So you can track that down. That's kind of a classic video really of having two rooms, one sprinklered, one not sprinklered, setting off, two identical, well, as much as possible, identical fires, and just seeing the difference that sprinkler system brings to the room where sprinklers are provided, and how quickly it stops the fire, how it contains the fire damage to a very small area. And the room without sprinklers, obviously the fire grows very rapidly, and the whole room is destroyed pretty quickly. So as I say, yeah, lots to say on sprinklers. So I'll be going through some of the bits today, and then I'll also be I'll be telling you some of the things that will be coming up in the future episodes. So let's get on with it. So sprinkler history. So was it the first presentation? I think it was the second presentation, Sprinkler Talk number 2. I talked about sprinkler history. Again, it's a very big topic, and I don't want to kind of go overboard on the history of sprinklers, because although it is interesting, it isn't of massive relevance as far as today is concerned. It obviously just gives you a kind of an idea and a confidence really about the sprinkler industry that we have been around for a very long time, and that the designs have continuously improved and got better, got more reliable, and that's obviously a big selling point for sprinklers in general. So I've just got a few examples here. A sprinkler from around 1810. So again, we can see this idea here that the fire is going to set alight this kind of wick on the left-hand side. That then causes this kind of operation of the valve to open in order for the water to then be discharged out. You can see that the top of the sprinkler head there has got these kind of drilled holes in it, and that's going to discharge the water. So that was one of the first designs. I believe that is the one that was installed into the Theatre Royal in Drury Lane by William Colgreve. So yeah, around 1810. On the right-hand side of the screen there, we can see sprinkler heads from the kind of 1900s. These are using what's called a fusible link. So you can see that we've got that piece of metal that's kind of blocking the head and stopping the water coming out. Again, when the heat gets to the sprinkler head itself, it's going to melt that piece of metal, that kind of soldered joint, and then once that's melted, then ping, the plug will fall away and the water will be discharged. But already you can see in 1900 the actual the deflector plate, that thing that's at the top, looks remarkably similar to what it does today. So again, that's for me, again, that should give confidence to the industry that for over 100 years, it is recognisably a sprinkler head that we've got there in terms of the design. This one as well, I found which was interesting. So this is 1950s. sprinkler heads, and this is actually a salesman's sample pack, if you like. So these sprinkler heads were mounted into this piece of brass by the looks of it, and the salesman would actually carry that around with them. And again, we can now see the glass bulbs being brought in. We actually even have different coloured glass bulbs, which I'll come on to in a minute. The ones on the outside are, again, this kind of fusible link design with the soldered joint. But yeah, you can see, although they look a bit weird, I guess they look quite chunky in their design. Quite very industrial, obviously, because at this present time, they are still pretty much exclusively used for industrial applications and for say property protection only, really. But again, they are recognisable as sprinkler heads back in the 1950s. But yeah, let's move on now to present day. So these are some of the main variations in sprinkler heads. These I kind of just thought off top of my head, really. So I may have missed one or two from this list, but here's just a few of the things which are different from one sprinkler head to another. And when it comes to kind of choosing a sprinkler head, maybe specifying sprinkler heads, which ones are you going to use in your building? These are the things that you would need to be focusing on. One I've just thought of straight away is manufacturer. I don't have manufacturer on there. There are lots of different manufacturers out there, all producing sprinkler heads. There are a very large variety of different designs, kind of slightly different styles, I suppose. There is a lot of choice out there. So it can, I imagine, be quite daunting for some people. Like, well, which head do I take? These are some of the considerations anyway. Let's go through them. So first of all, we have response time. So this is also known as the response time index, the RTI. What that is, in brief, is how quickly does the head react in order to discharge water once it's up to temperature. So this isn't about its activation point, okay, or its activation temperature. You can see I've got that as a separate issue. So if the head is set to operate at 68 degrees, at 67 degrees, it should not operate. Definitely at 65, it will not operate. I mean, I guess they've got some kind of tolerance on them. But yeah, it should not operate unless it reaches its activation temperature. Once it does, then there's obviously going to be a slight delay. And we are talking seconds here for the head to actually then react to that temperature and to say in the case of a glass bulb, to break the glass bulb and then, say, cause the water to be discharged. So most of the time we talk in response time as either being standard response or being quick response. But as I say, there is a bit more detail to it than that. But that's the main thing that you need to know is there is this idea of a response time, and most of the time it's either standard response or it is quick response in terms of how quickly the bulbs or the heads activate before they get up. When they get to temperature, how quickly do they activate? I'm making a mess of explaining that. K factor is the next one. Now this is to do with the amount of water which is discharged. K factor actually refers to a measure of frictional resistance through the head, but obviously that the larger, it's basically the size of the hole or the orifice, that the larger the hole, the more water can flow through and the lower the frictional resistance. The smaller the hole, the greater the frictional resistance, and the less water that can flow through in a period of time. And that's measured in litres per minute in the UK kind of sprinkler industry. So I will be talking in more detail about K factor, but yeah, that's essentially what it means. So you might see a K80 sprinkler head, you might see a K115, for example, and that's what it's to do with. It's about how many litres per minute we're actually going to get out of this sprinkler head. So it kind of stands to reason if you've got a high hazard storage environment, the K factor of the head will be much larger than a residential sprinkler head, for example, because we don't need as many litres per minute being discharged. Talking of discharge, we then have the discharge pattern. So this is kind of the main differential, I suppose, between the different manufacturers. Different manufacturers will have a different style of deflector plate in order to discharge the water. I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying that all sprinkler heads will use a deflector in order to create the discharge of pattern of the water. So it is the water hitting that deflector which creates the droplets, that creates the fine spray, as we call it, and spreads the water out over the given area. So the actual amount, the kind of the radius of that water discharge, and how much water goes up, how much water goes down, what is the amount of water discharged in the middle towards the outside, how evenly is that distributed, all of that is part of the discharge pattern. And again, all the manufacturers will have information about the discharge pattern of every particular head, and that is one of the things which is tested when the head goes for approvals. They'll be testing the discharge pattern. So again, there's more to say on that, but that will do for now in terms of getting a kind of general idea about what we're talking about. Next, activation temperature. So different sprinkler heads will have different target activation temperatures. Again, I've got a slide coming up next to explain that in more detail. But essentially, it will depend on the application as to what you want the activation temperature to be, and that obviously very much based on the normal environment. What is the ambient temperature likely to be in the place in which the head is being installed? Depending on that ambient temperature, you may want to have a higher activation temperature, you may want to have a lower activation temperature. I think I've mentioned various times 68 degrees. That in the UK is a very standard activation temperature. That's what we'd expect it to be, but there are lots of other different temperatures you can choose. The activation method is the next one. So say that the main two types are the fusible link and the glass bulb. So there's kind of two main ways in which the head will essentially go from closed to open in method and in activation. Installation position and type. Again, I'll come on to this more today. They can be installed upright or in the pendant position. They can be installed on slopes, but again, you'd need to kind of check the data sheets in terms of whether they are suitable for slope ceilings, and if so, what's kind of the maximum angle you can have it at. We have concealed sprinkler heads, we have exposed sprinkler heads. So there's kind of a lot there in terms of the installation position and the type, and sidewalls as well that we can have as a different type. Approvals, very important. You will be using sprinkler heads that are approved. I think you shouldn't be using sprinkler heads which haven't got any approval on them at all. I mean, that's no good. But there are lots of different approval bodies out there, and some sprinkler heads will have multiple approvals. Some sprinkler heads will just have one approval, and that's again that for someone that's inexperienced, that's getting quite daunting in terms of, well, which approval do I want? And it might not be quite as simple as you might think. For example, if you're doing an LPCB sprinkler job, then it would make sense to have LPCB sprinklers, but often, a different approval, so a UL approved sprinkler head, for example, may well be acceptable. It very much depends. So you just need to be on the ball in terms of which heads have got which approvals. The actual testing that the approval body does is going to be quite similar. They're going to be rigging them up in a room. They're going to be setting fire to the room. They're going to be having the sprinkler heads installed at certain distances, certain heights, and they're going to be measuring the effectiveness and also comparing the kind of what the manufacturer says is going to happen in terms of the K factor, the discharge pattern, the discharge density, and then actually measuring that in real life and making sure that what the manufacturer is saying is correct. So yeah, that's approvals. Then we have material and finish. So the ones that I showed you on the first couple of slides, they were what we call a plain finish, an unfinished type. So sprinkler heads are mostly brass in construction. So you would have that kind of unfinished look to the heads. And obviously, if you're in an industrial application, then you don't really care what the sprinkler heads look like. You're not wanting to spend extra on kind of fancy finishes. So yeah, just have that plain finish. But you can also have them in kind of a chrome finish or stainless steel. You can have sort of coated in white, in black, and actually any colour you like. A lot of manufacturers will colour code your sprinkler heads to whatever colour you like. You say, well, give me a RAL colour or give me a Pantone colour, and I'll match it for you. Same with the cover plates on concealed sprinkler heads. Again, they can be whatever colour you like. And that is one of the things that feeds into my last point about cost. So sprinkler heads are not expensive. Really they're kind of a few pounds each for a normal sprinkler head. But obviously, if you start getting into sprinkler heads that are more specialist, then the price is going to go up. If you want a particular finish or particular colour, the cost will obviously increase. And say it depends also on kind of the popularity of the head, as it does with everything else. It's supply and demand and making them in bulk. So yeah, if you're using a normal sprinkler head in inverted commas, which is very popular, then the price to say is going to be just a few pounds per head. So yeah, those are some of the sprinkler head variations. As I say, I may have missed one or two out of there, and we'll kind of pick up on that on future sessions. And some of these things I'll be talking about in more detail today. Some of these things I'll be talking in more detail about in future presentations, say in Sprinkler Heads Part 2 or maybe even Part 3. All right, moving on. I think it's about so here is some examples of sprinkler bulb colours. So we do have, I hesitate to say complete sort of standardisation as far as the colours go. I have noticed there are some kind of variations, but I think it would be fair to say that orange is always lower than red, and yellow is always higher than red, and green is always higher than yellow. But the actual activation temperature, I think, does vary a little bit depending on the manufacturer and the country of origin as well. But anyway, here is some examples of some different coloured bulbs. and the actual activation temperature or sprinkler rating, as I've called it, on the left-hand side of the screen there. So as I keep kind of going back to, the red coloured bulb is the one that we are 99% most likely to see when we're out and about. If we're in a shopping centre, although we're not in shopping centres at the moment, in a cinema, although we're not in cinemas at the moment, or a leisure centre, although we're not in leisure centres at the moment. All of those kind of typical, kind of life safety premises, offices, for example, they'll be using the red coloured bulb, and it is the bulbs are designed to activate at 30 degrees above a maximum normal temperature of a room. So, 38 degrees C, I mean, that's obviously pretty hot, definitely for the UK. We have had some very hot weather of late, and maybe all the windows are closed. Maybe we've got some glass windows, for example, so it heats up a bit more. It's possible that we would reach 38 degrees sort of inside our building, and therefore the heads are set to operate at 30 degrees above that. So, they're not going to go off accidentally. They're not going to go off, as I mentioned before, with kind of hair dryers and toasters and things like that. It's not going to happen. So at 68 degrees, you've got yourself a decent fire, because remember that's 68 degrees at the sprinkler head, which is going to be, a metre, 2 metres above whatever fire we've got, most likely, and the heat's going to be spreading out across the ceiling. So all of those kind of factors, they are not going to go off accidentally. But say that the point of this slide is the different colours. So, for example, if we're in a kind of cold store environment, then obviously the ambient temperature is lower, and therefore we're going to use a different head. When I've said kitchens for yellow, I don't want people to get the impression that every kitchen will have yellow sprinkler heads. Not the case. If you're in a kind of residential building, for example, and you're sprinkler protecting your kitchen, you would not generally have a higher rated bulb. When I say kitchens, I'm kind of talking industrial kitchens, which again, are typically going to be hotter areas, hotter ambient temperature. But yeah, unless the heads are directly above kind of a kitchen unit which is generating a lot of heat, then say for the normal kind of domestic kitchens, the red bulbs are going to be fine. Otherwise, yellow heads could be used in maybe shop windows, for example. As I've mentioned, if we've got a lot of glass and the sun, then we're going to be getting a higher temperature, and therefore these yellow bulbs could be useful there. And then other, obviously, specialist applications, machinery areas, hot processes, industrial ovens, etc. They're all obviously going to have a much higher rated bulb. Okay, so yeah, as I mentioned, upright sprinkler head. So that picture in the corner there is an example of this kind of unfinished look, and that's in the upright position. So again, in an industrial environment, we've got a kind of a warehouse, we've got forklifts going around. Then having the sprinkler heads installed in the upright position has got the advantage of giving a little bit of extra protection to the heads, because they're kind of out of the way. And also any debris, any dirt, corrosion within the pipe is obviously going to sit on the bottom of the pipe, and therefore the heads are going to be kept nice and clear and clean from any potential issues in the pipework. Pendant head. So we've got the pipework in the ceiling void, and the head just kind of pokes through the plasterboard or the false ceiling, or the what's it called, the ceiling grids, tiles, etc. So again, that's going to be good for an office or hospital, etc. Where we don't want the pipes on show. We can just have the heads kind of popping through, and the picture is showing you this kind of chrome or bright finish on the heads. And then we have a sidewall head. So these are where you can spray the water in from the side of the room rather than from the ceiling. Now, there are going to be several reasons why you may not want to put sprinkler heads into the ceiling. It might be to do with the construction of the ceiling. It might be that you've got like an ornate ceiling. You know, maybe it's an old building with some kind of special plaster work on it, and you don't want to disturb it. Or maybe it's just more convenient, because again we talked about the kind of ceiling voids. Maybe you don't want a ceiling void, and therefore you can come in from the walls instead of the ceiling. So there are some reasons why a sidewall head may well be a good solution. But obviously they have a maximum distance in which they can throw the water into the room. So for large rooms, you either are going to need a couple of sprinkler heads in the middle. Or you can't use sidewall heads at all because they're just not good enough. The room is too big. So hotel rooms and corridors, for example, are kind of a good example where sidewall heads may well be a good solution. And the finish I can show you there is the white finish, which is again very, very common to see that kind of white head. Question I've got about build-up of debris where you've got the pendant head. I mean, essentially, you don't. It is unlikely you're going to have that level of build-up within the pipes to cause a problem. You can do flushing, for example, to help kind of push the debris through, and that is required as a 25-year process. But one of the, again, we're not talking about mist systems at the moment, but yeah, one of the advantages of a sprinkler head is that we do have several millimeters of hole to work with, probably 10 or 12 millimeters of actual hole for the water to come out. So it's going to have to be quite a large amount of debris in order to actually cause us an issue in terms of kind of getting that out when the heads are operating. But yeah, essentially, there isn't anything we can do for the debris within potential debris within a pendant arrangement. Obviously, if it's CPVC, then we're not going to get corrosion within there. We may still have bits of glue, the shavings from the when they put the plastic pipe together, they kind of deburr it, and obviously that they're supposed to be quite careful in terms of deburring it and then cleaning it off. But there might be bits of plastic within the pipe, so it is a very small risk. But so there isn't a massive amount you can do once it's installed. This is one thing I wanted to point out to you. Kind of a very quick way of determining whether you've got a quick response head or a standard response head. Now, I've got a whole presentation coming up about life safety, and that's one of the key things. For life safety, we want to use quick response heads, where the RTI, the response time index, is less than 50. We use a smaller bulb, a 3mm bulb. The standard bulbs are 5mm. You can see they're a bit chunkier. So just by picking two sprinkler heads at random, again, anyone with just a small amount of experience should be able to quickly determine whether it's a quick response head or a standard response head. But it should actually be stamped on the top of the head as well, on the deflector plate normally, which again I'll show you in maybe next part. I'll show you the kind of top of the sprinkler head and see what kind of markings we can find on there. I'm conscious of time. I'm kind of going over time a little bit here. So I'll probably pick up on this another time, but this is just a note to kind of warn you about fast response and quick response. Okay? They're not actually the same thing. And this is this is key for why concealed sprinkler heads are generally only used in residential and domestic, and concealed sprinkler heads, say, are generally not used in industrial and commercial applications, although there is kind of a growing change in that kind of environment. But this is mainly to do with the difference between fast response and quick response. So as I said before, for life safety, under 12845, we want to use quick response sprinkler heads. And you might find a concealed sprinkler head and you say, right, well, it's labelled as fast response. Well, that's the same thing, isn't it? Not really, no, because quick response is a subtype of fast response. Fast response is really to do with the actual bulb, the actual kind of RTI of that bulb. But quick response really is to do with the actual unit itself. So a fast response sprinkler head may not be a quick response head because of other factors that need to go on. So for a concealed sprinkler head, I've got a few illustrations here. We've got a generally, there are lots of different types, so this is just kind of a general design I've shown on the screen here. We've got a cover plate. So we've got a sprinkler head, we've got a hole drilled through our plasterboard or false ceiling or whatever it is, and we've got a cover plate which is kind of concealing that hole. And the actual sprinkler head itself is kind of in the ceiling void. The cover plate is held on with a soldered joint, so it's designed to melt and fall away well in advance of the actual activation temperature of the head. So when there's a fire, it's going to kind of melt that the joint holding that cover plate on. The cover plate falls away, and then what happens is the deflector just drops down into the ceiling. That's just on gravity. It's on kind of runners, if you like. So once that cover plate has fallen down, that cover plate was holding the deflector up. So now the deflector can drop down, and then the heat can actually get to the bulb itself, heat up the bulb, and then the bulb breaks, and the water hits the deflector, and the water is discharged in a similar kind of way. So hopefully you can appreciate that although it might be a fast response bulb in our concealed sprinkler head, they're not generally rated as quick response, because the cover plate's got to fall away at the appropriate temperature, because the deflector plate has got to fall away at the appropriate temperature, and then the bulb has got to operate. So we've actually got three things that have got to happen rather than just one. And that's why the approval bodies often will not approve the head as quick response, even though it might have a 3mm bulb that's used within it. So yeah, we've got some other types here. So this is a kind of a semi-concealed sprinkler head using a kind of modern fusible link design. Again, these are becoming much more popular, and these are suitable for both the residential and industrial and commercial environments as well. So they again quite common to see these days. Okay, so that's kind of the end of part one. So I just want to tell you a little bit about what's coming up in future. I suppose I'm saying, what am I going to be talking about in sprinkler heads? What left is there to talk about with sprinkler heads? So I'm going to have a look at the actual data sheets of a sprinkler head and kind of point out what all the kind of terms mean. So I'll show you the top of a sprinkler head and what kind of marks and information it's got on it. A live demonstration, I put a little asterisk there. I'm not quite sure what that's going to look like yet, but yes, I do want to show you something live using the webcam. A little bit more on K factors, explaining what effect that has on flow rates and kind of the equation we can use. We'll look at discharge patterns in a bit more detail and discharge density. The actual design and installation of sprinkler heads in terms of the distance apart, and how you actually do the second fix of pipe to actually get to the heads. Specifying sprinkler heads, so I'll show you some manufacturers' websites and how you can kind of quickly identify, what kind of head you're looking for, and say looking for the approvals of it, and the different options are available. And then there are some special types of sprinkler head as well, such as EFSR, for example, which I'll go through again in a bit more detail. So yeah, that's it. I got carried away there talking about sprinkler heads in a geeky fashion. But next week we're going to be looking at Legionella and biofilming, which is a common question I get asked. Obviously, sprinklers are based on water in pipes, and water in pipes. There's obviously a concern about Legionella, so I'll be telling you about that. And also a fairly new expression to me, biofilming. I've kind of only been aware of that really for kind of 12 months, so I'll be telling you what that is, and again how that fits into the sprinkler industry. Should we be worried about it? Is there things we can do to prevent biofilming from taking place? So yeah, hope you enjoyed that. Hope you found that useful, and hope you can join me next week. But yeah, as always, I'll be having a look at the comments on Blue Jeans and Facebook and seeing if there are any questions, and I'll be doing my best to answer them.